Hello YouTube, welcome back to Film Recap. I'm your host Jonathan, and today we'll be covering a 2017 American psychological horror film, Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. The movie revolves around an African American man named Chris who goes to visit his white girlfriend's family estate. As the weekend unfolds, he begins to uncover disturbing secrets about the family and their unsettling attitudes toward race. Now that I have your attention, let's get into the movie. A young black man named Andre is shown in the first shot strolling by himself through a beautifully maintained suburban street at night. When he approaches, a small sports car pulls up and begins to follow him. After becoming startled, Andre utters a phrase and abruptly reverses course, walking swiftly back in the opposite direction. The automobile is still parked where it was when he turns to check what the vehicle did, but the door is open. Andre is suddenly attacked by a man wearing a medieval helmet, knocking him out and carrying his body to the automobile. With pastries and coffee, Rose shows up at the apartment of her lover, Chris, a photographer. He worries that they are unaware that she is dating a black man as they prepare to visit her relatives for the weekend. She reassures him that although they could say some foolish things, they are quite progressive. If he had the option, her father would have cast a third vote for Obama. She admits that Chris is the only black man she has ever dated, but she is sure that her parents will be entirely understanding. Chris asks for a cigarette on the way to her parents' house, but Rose takes it and throws it out the window, telling Chris that her parents would be furious that she is dating a smoker. In a cell phone call to his friend Rod, a TSA officer working at a nearby airport, Chris cautions him to take good care of his dog and avoid feeding him people food. Chris is chastised by Rod for dating a white woman and told that going to visit the white people is a terrible idea. Chris becomes a little envious when he flirts a little with Rose, but Rose finds it cute. A deer darts in front of the automobile and gets hit as they are distracted and deeply engaged in conversation. When they call the police and stop to investigate, they are questioned about their whereabouts by the officers. Rose explains to them that they are visiting her close family. Rose intervenes and argues that since Chris wasn't driving, the officer doesn't need to see his identification. Chris comments to Rose that it was amazing of her to stand up for him against the racist officer before the officer releases them. Chris and Rose arrive at Rose's parents' house. A friendly neurosurgeon, who is her father, Dean Armitage, informs Chris that he would have cast a third vote for Obama if he had the option. Missy, her mother, practices hypnotherapy in a disturbingly icy manner. She offers to use hypnosis to help Chris break his nicotine addiction, but Chris feels uncomfortable with her meddling in his thoughts. Additionally, the Armitages had two black employees working for them, Georgina, the housekeeper, and Walter, the groundskeeper. They were hired to take care for his parents, and Dean would have felt horrible firing them. Dean admits that it looks bad for two wealthy white people to have two black workers. There is undoubtedly something strange about Walter and Georgina. They definitely exude a rigid, false Stepford civility. In addition, they both talk in old-fashioned language. Chris is given a tour of the home by Dean, who also shows him old family photographs. Dean asserts that Jesse Owens defended his father, a track runner, to compete in the 1936 Olympics in front of Hitler. It was gratifying to see Hitler's Aryan idealism disproved, even though it was unfortunate for his father. Rose's brother, who will be joining them later, is also included in the pictures. Like his father, he is a surgeon, but he experienced some difficulties. In the afternoon, the family gathers for tea. Missy stirs her tea and delicately taps the teacup 3 times with her spoon. Missy inquires about Chris's parents. Chris alleges that his mother passed away after being struck by a car when he was 11, and that his father abandoned the family when he was a small child. While pouring tea, Georgina sort of short-circuits, and Missy advises her to go lay down and recover. Rose is informed by the Armitages that their huge party will take place tomorrow. She is taken back, and they reassure her that the date is the same each year. Arriving is Jeremy, Rose's brother. He is a violent, spoiled, privileged child. Afterwards, an inebriated person showed up to dinner. Jeremy begins to discuss MMA combat with Chris, claiming that Chris would be a natural because of his strong heritage. Chris refuses to let him spar since he has rules against play fighting with inebriated people. Maybe it's time for Jeremy to go to bed, says Dean and Missy. Rose apologizes for her family before Chris and Rose retreat to their room and fall asleep. Chris decides to sneak outside for a cigarette in the middle of the night after getting up. He is outside when he notices something approaching him from a distance. It's Walter. He approaches Chris directly, then abruptly turns around and goes in a different direction. Georgina is gazing out a window within the home. She is, in fact, gazing at her own reflection and not Chris. Chris makes the decision to go back inside while she alters her hair. Chris is startled by Missy putting on a light before he can return to his room. She reiterates her offer to help him stop smoking and argues that it is a horrible habit. She uses her teaspoon as a focus item while she slowly hypnotizes him while he sits there mocking the idea of hypnotism. She takes him back to the night his mother passed away when he was 11 years old. He recalls that he was too terrified to do anything like call the police. That would make it real. So he just sat in front of the TV, frantically pounding his bedpost. Chris is currently engaging in the same behavior by pressing his nails into the chair's arms. Instructing him to sink, she taps her teacup 3 times with a spoon. While Chris is in the present, slips into darkness and sees himself and Missy far above. Chris in the past sinks into his bed at the age of 11. His body paralyzed in the chair is no longer cognizant. He checks his phone as soon as he gets out of bed. Chris received a photo of Rod acting like he was giving his dog booze. He plugs it in since his battery is low. Chris says to Rose that he believes her mother hypnotized him the night before, but he only has hazy memories of the event. Rich friends of the Armitages show up for the big event. The majority of elderly white people who make improper comments to Chris include things like, he has a good build, black guys are better in bed, and because Tiger Woods played golf, he must have a good swing. Chris leaves the party undercover and meets Jim, a blind man who claims that everyone there is uneducated. Chris perfectly aware of his identity and that he is an art dealer. Jim claims to appreciate Chris's creative output. He acknowledges the irony of a blind art dealer, but informs him that he has an excellent assistant who excels at describing artwork. He wishes he had Chris's eye. Jim claims that he attempted photography himself but was never very successful. Chris finds another black man as he returns to mingling with the visitors. He is around Chris's age, and Chris tries to connect with him, but just like Walter and Georgina, he is rigid and unnatural. Chris, though, notices an underlying similarity in him. When Chris goes to check in with Rod once more, he discovers that his phone is once more disconnected. He connects it, makes contact with Rod, and informs him of the situation. Rod cautions him to leave the area since white people enjoy having sex slaves. Chris tells Rose how strange everything is and that his phone was unplugged once more when she sees him. She explains to him that his paranoia is simply a result of his difficult circumstances. She departs once she gives his approval. Chris is instructed by Rod to snap a photo of the black man so that he may check his memory. Georgina blocks Chris from leaving and apologizes for unplugging his cell phone. She lifted it up when just in the nightstand and didn't want to fiddle with it anymore once it came unplugged. He claims that everything is okay and that he didn't intend to expose her. She is unable to comprehend. He then makes it clear that he didn't intend to put her in danger. When she tells him that the Armitages treat her like family, she gets really strange and sheds a single tear. Chris returns to the street and uses his cell phone to try to sneakily take a picture of the recognizable black man, but he has neglected to turn off the flash. The moment the phone flashes, the man reacts. He transitions from being too proper to ranting. He yells at Chris to get out as his nose begins to bleed. Rose is now also terrified. She asks her father what occurred, and he replies that the man had a seizure as a result of the flash. The man emerges, apologizes for upsetting everyone, and states that he needs to go home. Chris informs Rose as they go out for a stroll that he is positive he recognized the man and that something odd is unquestionably happening. She concurs, stating that it did not appear to be having a seizure at all. Chris claims he would like to leave right away and go home. Rose agrees hesitantly. She promises to invent a story to tell her parents. Dean is hosting a silent auction with his visitors back at the mansion, and they are using bingo cards to place bids. A picture of Chris is placed next to him. The auction is won by Jim. Everyone else leaves and returns home. As Chris begins to pack his possessions, Rod calls him to inform him that the man in the image is a man they know by the name of Dre, who used to work at a theater but recently vanished. The phone's battery runs out. Chris observes the open closet door. When he looks inside, he discovers a box containing pictures of Rose kissing numerous other black men. Additionally, there are pictures of her with Walter and Georgina, neither of whom resemble the artificial versions Chris has encountered. Chris turns out to not be Rose's first encounter with a black man. Chris informs Rose that he wants the keys to load their stuff into the car when she comes back. They leave the house and she searches her purse for them. Jeremy arrives out of nowhere, blocking the entrance. Missy and Dean are also present. When Missy and Dean tell Jeremy to calm down, Jeremy is about to launch an assault. Rose keeps hearing from Chris to grab the keys. Chris is informed by Missy and Dean that they do not want him to leave. Rose replies calmly to Chris, repeatedly requests for the keys. You know I can't give you the keys, right? Chris finally understands Rose is also involved in whatever this is. Chris is beaten by Jeremy. Chris falls back into the gloomy emptiness once more as a result of Dean screaming and Missy banging her glass with the teaspoon. Rod tries to call Chris repeatedly, but the call always goes to voicemail. He goes to the police after researching the man in the photo and discovering that he has been missing for some time. He claims in front of a female officer that his son was abducted by white people to serve as a sex slave, just like the man missing in the photo. To hear Rod's account, she summons 2 additional police officers. They all start giggling after he's done. He won't be taken seriously by anyone. When Chris awakens, he is restrained to a chair in front of an antique TV and a mounted deer head. He views a video that Dean's father created in which he discusses immortality and other topics. Chris notices that the pattern on the chair has been exposed after his fingernails tore through the leather. On the screen once more are teacup and spoon. After a constant clinking, he leaves. When Rod calls Chris again, Rose picks up. She tells a fib when she claims that Chris left 2 days ago and that she is also worried about his whereabouts. She says he fled in an Uber or perhaps a taxi. She expresses alarm when Rod informs her he went to the cops. She tells him she knows he has feelings for her when he picks up on the fact that something is off and tries to capture the conversation. He calls her a crazy and ends the call. Jim is on the TV when Chris awakens. They're going to switch brains, he declares to Chris. Jim couldn't care less about being black compared to the other partygoers because what he really wants is to be able to see the world through Chris's eyes. Dean's mastery in neurosurgery has made all of this possible. In order to prepare the body donors for the procedure, Missy hypnotizes them. He will continue to exist in the pitch black emptiness, but he will be able to travel alone as a kind of passenger. As they had previously witnessed at the party, the flashing is an unwelcome side effect. Chris is once more gone with the clinking of the teaspoon. Jim is prepared for a brain transplant by Dean and Jeremy. Dean instructs Jeremy to find Chris. Chris is found unconscious by Jeremy as he walks down the hallway. We can tell now that they were in their home's basement. Chris had placed chair padding over his ears to muffle the sound of a teaspoon, so he wasn't really unconscious after all. He eliminates Jeremy. In order to find Jeremy, Dean makes a call and leaves the lab area. Chris charges at him and stabs him with the antlers from the animal in the adjacent room. He topples a candle, setting it ablaze and setting Jim's blanket on fire as well. Rose is unaware of anything because she has had her headphones in. She is searching for a picture of muscular, attractive black men while listening to music. Chris locates Missy after going upstairs. Chris outruns her and shatters the teacup as she reaches for the spoon and cup. Instead, she uses a knife to assault him. However, he turns the knife against her, killing her instantly. Chris tries to enter the house through the front entrance once more, but Jeremy is there and chokes him. Chris tries to pull open the front door twice, but Jeremy shuts it both times. On the third attempt, Chris stabs Jeremy in the thigh and brutally head stomps him, breaking his skull as he kicks the door. He dashes outside and enters Jeremy's vehicle. The medieval helmet from before is sitting on the passenger seat. Georgina is hit as he begins to drive down the driveway. He cannot simply leave her to suffocate like he did to his mother, so he puts her in a car and drives off down the driveway. When she awakens, she attacks him. During this, her wig slips off, revealing a scar from a brain transplant across her head. They collide with a tree, and she dies. Through her headphones, Rose hears this. The rearview mirror is suddenly destroyed. Chris is being pursued by Rose, who has a gun. She sees Georgina and calls her grandma, despite his pleadings for her to desist. Chris is not hit by Rose's second shot. "Get him, Grandpa," Rose calls out as Walter unexpectedly dashes by her in pursuit of Chris and tackles him. Chris snaps a photo of Walter as they struggle on the ground. Flash. Walter turns around and requests Rose's weapon. He asks for it, shoots her in the stomach, then turns the gun on himself. Rose is bleeding to death on the ground. Chris bats away her attempt to grab the gun. Rose places a hand on Chris's cheek and tells him she loves him as he stoops over her. Chris begins to choke Rose, but stops himself because he cannot finish the job. A police car approaches. Rose makes a faint reach for assistance, knowing that Chris will be arrested by the local police. However, Rod is the one getting out of the police car. Chris enters the vehicle. Rod tells Chris he shouldn't have went there after surveying all the mayhem. Rod responds that he works for TSA and assures Chris that everything will be fine when Chris inquires about how he located him. As Rod and Chris drives away into the darkness, Rose grins as she takes her final breath. Rod drives Chris away from the scene as Rose lies dead in the road as the movie comes to a close. If you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button on your way out. Thanks for watching my video.